Berg has responded pretty well, but will that gap grow? It's what, 4 or 5 yards now. Just keep an eye on that gap because Brianne Nelson is gradually turning the screw. She's a 32.5-minute 10,000 meter runner on the track as Nelson. She's pretty useful on the oval athletics track. Set up PB for 7 miles at the National Championships in Davenport back in late July. She's built on that speed and strength in this, her 3rd marathon, and she is now just beginning to ease away. There's no doubt about it. That gap is growing.
Well, if she had done any competitive analysis of the field, she would be carrying a good dose of confidence into this last part of the race. Not to take anything away from Heather Lieberg, who's done a phenomenal job, and again has been a specialist at the half marathon this year, finishing 3rd in Pittsburgh and then winning the one in Missoula. But, definitely a difference in at least capabilities coming into this race. Lieberg still running really the marathon of her life, right in the mix of a USA Marathon Championship, well within earshot of the money. But now, as we look back on the camera and depth of field can somewhat work its magic one way or the other. It does look like the field is getting a little bit tightened up as Ariana Hilborn is beginning to close the gap, and maybe there's a sense from Nelson that there was someone coming up. We obviously are not following him the entire time, so perhaps a look back and noticing that there was someone coming up from behind to challenge for these top positions.
Well, 24 miles there in about 2:21:35, and without any doubt, Brianne Nelson must know what's going on because Hilborn is what, 50 or 60 yards down there. Top right of picture. She's closed pretty quickly, frankly, over the last 10 minutes or so. We haven't seen her coming much. Last time we got an indication there was about a 150, 200-yard gap at the least, maybe more. But now she's got these two in her sights. They've shared the lead throughout the race for nearly 2.5 hours now. Have Brianne Nelson in the lead and Heather Lieberg there now in 2nd place, who has closed again. But there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Hilborn from Tempe, Arizona is closing down on these two. Esther Erb back in 4th place. That was the last indication we had about 10 or 15 minutes ago. But that gap is closing frighteningly quickly. Boy, she's going to be on them in a minute or two.
Well, we talked about it earlier. Hilborn didn't run in college. In fact, began running in 2007, according to her blog, just to stay in shape, and she ran her first marathon that year in 4:36 and has steadily improved throughout and has a personal best of 2:37:28 that she set back in 2011, qualified for the Olympic trials in 2012, and indeed is definitely putting one foot in front of the other a bit faster than the two women in front of her, and the gap continues to close here, so shaping up to be a pretty good race for the women's side, which didn't appear to be the case early on, as it was just a 2-woman race for almost the entire first 20 miles. You see the 24-mile split, and that gap, they're saying that Erb is in 3rd, Nelson is in 1st at 2:21:34. So we'll get confirmation here in a moment whether that is actually Erb or Hilborn.
Well, if it's Erb, and they are both wearing yellow, Erb and Hilborn, which is confusing, of course. It doesn't help. We'd expect it to be Erb, but the last indicator we got was it was Hilborn who was 7 seconds ahead of Erb.
I'm just looking from running style. It may actually indeed be Erb.
Well, if it is, she has rallied incredibly well. And I said she'd be on them in a minute or two, and indeed she is. We now have a group of 3, and I guess what she's got to do, she's got 2 options here. Either sit in behind them, have a little breather, and then push again for home with, about 10 minutes to run. Or just maintain her tempo and keep running through them, go straight past, blow past them. But if you do that, the textbooks always say put in a slight acceleration when you get past them. Let them think you're moving even quicker than you were. Get the gap on them quickly. Don't go past them with that slightly better speed and have them hang on to and get dragged through. But it does look like she's tucking in and taking a slight breather, having worked very, very hard over the last few miles to close this gap.
So Erb was a Division III champion at 10,000 meters. Back in 2008 at Case Western, was third in the USA Marathon Championships last year.
Well, Erb has finished third last year. She won't be happy with anything but at least one place better in this, her third marathon of 2014. Some would say that's going to the well too often, but those marathons earlier in the year, only 11 weeks apart, Tallahassee and then Boston, where she finished in 11th place. And if you think that she ran Boston back in mid-April, but she's had a long, long break since then, plenty of time to recover.
Well, we'll await the chance to listen to a few of these finishers with Carey after the race, but also too, you looked at the field coming into this USA Marathon Championships with a good prize money pool. Perhaps it was a calculated risk getting that third race in and potentially coming home with up to $25,000 was worth the third effort on the year.
Well, we've had a stunning result in the men's race. If you've joined us in the last few minutes with that debut win for Tyler Pennell in 2:13.33, just destroying the field over the last 10 kilometers or so. I wonder if we're due for an upset here. Heather Lieberg in third place to write a picture has had a fabulous run. She's undoubtedly heading for a PR here, but she's beginning to lose ground now as the big two really face off here. Brianne Nelson nearest the camera, 2:34 performer. Esther Erb, about a minute quicker on paper in the yellow, has closed down on these two. Now, the only thing we've got to remember is that Erb has been working very hard for the last few miles to close on this pair. She was a couple of 100 yards down or more a few miles back. Is she tired now? And has Brianne Nelson been waiting for something like this? Has she got something in reserve?
Well, Nelson does not want to let Esther by her, and she is forcing the pace now. And, credit Lieberg. She's come back in seemingly just about 100 meters ago. Looked like she was fading away, but back to the group of three women here as they take another little climb up the hill.
Well, I do know that Esther Erb had to make a toilet break and lost about 30 seconds a few miles back. And that is why the gap got much bigger than it should have done. But it's amazing what a recuperative effect that kind of a break can have on you in the latter stages of the marathon. I know that from experience. And Erb now hits the front for the first time. And it's kind of cruel, isn't it, that these two, Brianne Nelson and Lieberg, have shared the lead for some 25 miles or so. And now, at the 11th hour, almost within sight of the state capitol and the cathedral in the center of St. Paul, they've had to give best to Esther Erb. But you have to say, perfect timing from Erb.
Yeah, she looks very strong right now. Lieberg in second. And Nelson now the one that is losing ground.
Yeah, Brianne Nelson tried very hard to hang with Esther Erb there for half a mile or so, and that actually can sometimes be a mistake. You overextend yourself when you're already under enormous pressure physically, and you fall back off that extra effort and drop way, way back below what would have been your optimum pace. And she's now in third place, perhaps paying for that effort to try and stay with Esther Erb here, who is pushing on so strongly. Up on her toes, isn't she, Erb, for the first time?
Yeah, we remember back in the early part of the race, she was running alongside a couple of other male runners and just sort of looked like she was just enjoying the view. A very comfortable pace, and we knew she had the speed, and these last few miles is just put the pedal to the metal and is now, again, extending that lead, trying to put more distance between her and Lieberg with just a few minutes left to go in this women's race.
Well, inside the last mile now, we were predicting a winning time of around 2:34. That may or may not be the case, but on a course like this, where there are these twists and turns and undulations, and particularly these big hills in the latter stages, on a cold morning and without pacemakers critically too, times become less significant. This is a championship race. They're racing for the US title here and for second and third place medals in effect. I wonder if there are medals. But there's a lot of pride at stake, and times go out of the window in this sort of situation. Who cares of the winning time of an Olympic marathon? You're an Olympic champion. Do people remember the time of Dina Castro when she took her Olympic medal in Athens in 2004? Or Meb's time that same day when he took that same championship when he took a medal in the Olympics in 2004. No, they don't, of course. They remember the fact they're medalists. They remember gold medals. They remember the minor medals. And this is Esther Erb heading for a title as well here, and a time of secondary significance.
Well, and Nelson continues to fall away. She had a gutsy effort once Erb finally reached that top two pairing to try to go with her and keep her at bay, but just couldn't respond. And I think once Erb got the upper hand, she just realized it wasn't going to happen for her, and now she's just trying to hang on, falling even further behind Lieberg as well, who continues to run strong. Again, this a mother of three from Montana, has run well at the half marathon distance, has already qualified for the 16 marathon trials, and the 35-year-old currently in second on her way to probably a five-figure, well, most doubtedly a five-figure payday as a member of the top three finishing in the U.S. Marathon Championships. Again, $25,000 for first, $15,000 for second, and $10,000 for third.
Well, not only a five-figure payday, but something like a 3 or 4 minute PR coming Heather Lieberg's way. If she can just hang on to the coattails here of Esther Erb, who negotiates this last, final, rather nasty little climb up towards the city cathedral and St. Paul Cathedral, and then we'll enjoy that drop down to the finish line. Or maybe not. I understand that drop to the finish line is steeper than it looks on camera, and pretty punishing too for your legs. Yeah, the climax of just one little undulation there for Erb.
You can see it now. She's coming down the hill, and yeah, you're going to feel that in the shins in the next morning. But she's still got the pace she wants, and Lieberg is not going down without a fight. She's probably got the adrenaline going strongly as she realizes a career best effort in the marathon and just trying to stay within a few meters of the leader now, Esther Erb.
Well, the St. Paul Cathedral is the backdrop for Esther Erb heading for her U.S. title, her U.S. marathon title. Her PR 2:33.15. She's not going to be far outside that. That came in Boston back in April on a hot, hot day. She's past her 26-mile point. She's going to be mighty close to a PR, probably about 10 or 15 seconds outside it. As you rightly point out, Paul, Heather Lieberg in second place there. Send her a picture in the black strip with that awkward arm carriage, and behind her, Brianne Nelson in third place. What a great race they've had, these three, but I don't think Erb's going to be caught now. It's cruel, isn't it? These last few hundred yards consist of undulations, hardly a flat meter in them. But Esther Erb, after that little toilet break in the latter stage of the race, accelerates towards the line. No denying her dominance over these closing meters in this 33rd Medtronic Twin Cities Marathon. And the US title is hers in 2014 at last. She can smile, punch the air, and break the tape. 2:34 exactly there unofficially for Esther Erb. And just meters behind is Heather Lieberg, running a huge PR. 2:39.55 of Lieberg's personal best before today.